Attention game.
Workout technical demos that don't have persistence, commonly have wipes. Star Citizen is honestly solid for the base price. It's fun as and there's enough content there to be worth $40 to spend on it. If you have an idea for an MMO, right? An MMO generally is engaged persistence between players, and that persistent world has some kind of competition in some way, or some sort of sharing between those players that is persistent. This is not a persistent world yet. It is a number of technical demos that don't have persistence, commonly have wipes, and as such, isn't really a game yet. It is technical testing of what could one day become a game. So I can't agree with you there. I can't. Maybe one day it could become a really cool game, but the direction of their monetization leads me to believe that that day will never come. Yeah, it's just testing. It doesn't even matter how long it's been tested. Like, you have to understand something. It doesn't matter how long a game is in development. It doesn't. It does not matter how long a game is in development. What matters is the direction of development, the communication of the studio. The communication of the studio is fine. They do a good job of communicating the things they're working on. They have a massive roadmap. The direction of the studio, I can't agree with. The direction of the studio is heavily geared towards squeezing as much money out of the community. As possible. I can't agree with that. I think it's gross. And many of the ways that they're squeezing money out of the community could cause damage down the line to their game, such as selling insurance for ships that is lifetime. Something that we know inside of the gaming industry that we've known for a long time is the moment that a company sells a lifetime subscription to anything, that game is going to die. We've seen it timeless times, over and over again. Go back and even look at something like Hellgate London. Hellgate London was doing just fine, and then suddenly they released a lifetime subscription to the game. The moment you release a lifetime subscription to the game, it's about to go downhill. Happens every single time. I have never seen that work out because it's we don't have enough money, this isn't sustainable, inject a bunch of money into the system, maybe we can make it work, and if it doesn't work, the game's gonna die. That's why we do that. That is the reason that happens in the industry. So when you have a lifetime subscription to a ship before launch is even out, that is a massive red flag to me, dude. That is a massive, massive red flag to me. That is dangerous because the cost of running that the whole time, you're not recouping on any of it. So what the hell's going on there? On top of that, having $687 million when you're still in beta, that's disturbing to me. That's a lot. $87 million? So what the hell's going on there? On top of that, having $687 million when you're still in beta? That's disturbing to me. That's a lot. Of goddamn money. Didn't know that's a swan song? It is generally a swan song. It is very rare that a lifetime subscription is not a swan song for a studio. Very rare. In this case, it is a red flag. Not necessarily a swan song, but a red flag. And that's bothersome. Those people could have shares in the company. They could. The other thing that I think is a little bit weird is kind of the community interaction around the game, which is there's a number of people that talk about their purchases. in Star Citizen as investments. That is not an investment. An investment denotes some potential for return. That is a purchase of a item in a video game. That's a weird thing, and I don't understand culturally why that's being used. That's odd. It is not an investment. Should not call it that. I don't know why there's a number of people that have used this term, but it's very strange. Yeah, investment implies the potential for a return. Yeah, no, not an investment. And there are purchases in there that aren't ridiculous. There are. For like the initial ships or whatever the hell. But like seeing microtransactions go as high as $48,000, dude. No. There's no way that I could ever say that that's okay. Ever at all. That's not going to happen. So like the reason why I don't like it is this. I come from a time where you buy the video game. And then through effort, you earn the ability to progress. Star Citizen, you buy the video game, and then you can also buy that effort. You just buy the big boy ships. Wrong? I can go on there right now and buy those ships. I can buy every one of them. I don't have to build them. I don't have to spend time making them. I can just go buy them. You don't buy the game. You buy a ship in the video game. Are we playing semantics, boy, now? Is that what we're doing? Are we saying the game free, but you need to buy a ship to play the game? Is that what we're doing right now? Okay, here, let me make this more clear. In order to play the game, you need to buy a microtransaction in a demo in which there are frequent wipes. What good value? EVE Online ruined itself when it started making skill injectors sellable. Yeah, that was the immediate death of that game to me. You have to buy a package. You have to buy injectors in which there are in order to play the game, you need to buy a microtransaction in a demo in which there are frequent wipes. What good value? EVE Online ruined itself when it started making skill injectors sellable. Yeah, that was the immediate death of that game to me. You have to buy a package. You have to buy a package that comes with a starter ship. You are still buying the MMO package. Okay, here. Let me make this very clear to you. Any game where I can buy the video game, and then instead of using effort to attain endgame gear and activities, I can just whip out my credit card, is a game. That's it. It's a game. That's a game. I've made it very clear for you. When will you remove the Heartbound demo microtransactions? I'm on to you, Cardboard Cowboy. How you doing, by the way, man? We're talking about Store Citizen, which I don't respect. When you say microtransactions, what do you mean? I mean things that are not cosmetic. If you are able to purchase items that have any type of value in the game, such as being able to be traded for in-game currency of any kind, such as the WoW token, or in EVE Online, the same that ends up being a problem. If you are able to buy an item that gives you some sort of statistic or mechanical advantage in the game, or unlock statistic or mechanical bonuses in any possible way, that is a problem. The only thing that should be sold as a microtransaction in a game where I will not have a problem is cosmetic. It needs to be cosmetic in nature, not giving you a statistical or mechanical advantage in any possible way. That's it. This is a very simple concept. You're not going to wriggle your way around it and try and be like, Star Citizen is actually selling you cosmetic ships. No, they offer statistical and mechanical advantages to those different ships, unlocking additional content or different ways to play with more people, or at a statistical advantage over other ships. As such, this is pay to win. I refuse to play pay to win games. They are not fun because I'm not fighting you, I'm fighting your credit dumb. It's very simple. And I'll fight you all day in a video game. What about Warframe? Warframe doesn't have a statistical or mechanical advantage. That is a PvE game where everything is cosmetic. I have earned everything that I have obtained in Warframe, and I enjoy the shit out of it. Yeah, Fashion Frame is the endgame. What about Path of Exile? Path of Exile does not offer you a statistical or mechanical advantage in the game. The most egregious microtransaction they have is more stash tabs, I believe, which is a quality of life thing, which is kind of on the line. But that's not an advantage in the game, as much as people think it is, which is weird. Stash tabs are a little bit gross. Yeah, it's a lot of what about him. This is my favorite part about this, when I'm like, hey, this sucks ass. And people are like, well, what about this other game? That's called whataboutism. That's how that works. Does it offer a statistical or mechanical advantage? Use your brain. And if it does, then I think it sucks. It's not hard. It's a very simple concept. Statistical or mechanical advantage, or cosmetic? Cosmetic, fine. Statistical or mechanical advantage, not fine. Very simple concept. Brain, use brain. Use brain. Use brain. Use brain. Yeah, my opinion's pretty clear, and it's been the same for ages. Share the brain cell? Oh no. That assumes that every game that has multiplayer is the goal to win against other players. Every game that is multiplayer is inherently competitive in some way. Players will build competition out of it, Zoe. No matter what. No matter what kind of a game it is, there's always going to be some kind of a thing, some kind of a goal, achievement base, or anything like that. Even games that claim that they are not competitive, by their very nature, in multiplayer play, will become competitive because of the player base. That is always going to be the case. Even if the game itself does not offer competitive advantage at all, or competitive situations. Because you made it multiplayer, it will be that way. That's why we have a speedrunning community. That's the whole point with that. And the moment that you offer anything that makes you faster in a game like that, you've now offered pay to win for speedrunners. See? This is how this works. This is why I don't ever want to offer mechanical advantage or statistic advantage for money. Ever. It should only ever be cosmetic for money. Because cosmetic doesn't change the gameplay. Mostly just makes you laugh more in cutscenes when your character's like underwear's on the outside for $5 or some. Yeah, it's not a hard concept. I love that one. Okay, but there's this game that you could pay to get statistical and mechanical advantage. Do you think that's okay? No. 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 Like, dude, if you want to play Credit Card Warrior, just go play Clash of Clans, right? Like, who gives a at that point? Go play those games. Have fun with have fun sitting there like spending thousands of dollars to beat the other dude that's spending thousands of dollars and see whose credit card dick is larger than the other ones, right? Like that's what you're asking for when you want that kind of a game. It's not skill based.
The mods were fed $4.20.
That's not how that works. Like, enjoy your whale wars. Like, I don't want that. I don't want that in games that I play. It sucks. What about a game that offers a statistical or mechanical advantage? Disadvantage. Pay to lose. Cardboard Cowboy, have you just unlocked a new meta? Would that be me paying money so that I lose, or me paying money so that you lose stats? Can I pay $5 to, like, nerf you? Is that what you're trying to say to me? Like, instead of paying $5 to get stronger, I pay $5 so that you lose the game. I'd play that. What do you think of $100 plus games? So, there's a couple of things that are really interesting about this. Back in the day, a Super Nintendo game was $69.95. That's how much Secret of Mana cost when it first came out. Let's go pull this up. Inflation calculator. And what year did Secret of Mana launch? August 6, 1993. And we're going to go from August 1993, and we'll go to April of 2024. And we're going to say $69.95. If you were to buy that Super Nintendo game today, in today's currency, it'd be $151.47. That would be the cost. Dramatically higher, right? But the reason they were so expensive back then is because of physical distribution. That's the reason. We don't have that anymore. You don't have to make a cartridge. You don't have to put it on a store shelf. You don't have to physically ship it. You don't have to do any of that. We have digital distribution. It costs nothing. I have sold tens of thousands of copies of Heartbound, and it has cost us nothing. So when we're looking at this versus that, it doesn't make sense. We can't even make a comparison there. Steam still takes 30%? No, they don't. When I make a Steam key, and that key is for a $10 game, and then I sell that on Humble Bundle, what is the percentage that Steam takes from me? 0%. Steam only takes 30% of the sales you have on the Steam platform. Only on the Steam platform. Further than that, if you have trading cards for your game, which you always do, you make those yourself. Very easy. Whenever one of those sells between one player and another, there's a community market fee. Steam gives the developer the community market fee. That ain't 30%. That's a lot less than 30%. Depending on how you strategize your sales, it's dramatically less than 30%. And Steam does not charge you for the distribution of your patches or the game itself outside of that 30% cut. Isn't that literally pennies, though? No. No. Very funny. So the way that I look at this right now is this doesn't make sense. We live in a time of digital distribution, and the way that I see sales of games is like this. If it's $1, people see it as shovelware. If it's $3, they see it as an arcade game. $5 is a premium arcade game. $10 is an indie game. $20 is a premium indie game. Anything anywhere from 10 to 20 is a premium indie game. $40 is a day game. $60 is AAA. And anything 70 or above is a scam. That's the general way that people feel about games that I've seen so far. Like, this is the limit. Anything above that, and people hate you. Whether they feel it's worth it or not. The problem is this. The ones saying this, unfortunately, don't matter. As awful as that is. Because there's multitudes of people that are just buying the games anyway. an insane number of people that don't take any part in online discourse, don't take any part in talking about $70 game, don't take any part in any of this, and just buy the $100+ copies every time. You will find very quickly that the double down versions of games, instead of the $70 version, the $110 version, you'll find that these ones sell more than these ones almost every time. And if it is a $70 game, it'll likely have MTX in it that will end up making it sell more than this every time. The reason that the business model works this way is because people spend money on it. This is normal business for the games industry, and I reject the shit out of it. Why do you think our game is $10 and it won't have a sequel, and it won't have a prequel, and it won't have chapters, and it won't have DLC, and it won't have microtransactions? That's why it's $10, because I hate this business model. I hate it. I think it's shit, and I don't want to perpetuate it, even if it would make me more money, because it's not good for the industry. So I can't convince people to stop buying games like this. I can just stop selling games in that way and succeed in spite of that. So are sequels bad? No, but if you're making episodic content, it's not good for the game a lot of the times. I'll give you an example. Let's say that your base game is $10 and you release a DLC for $5, and then you release a DLC for $5 and you release a DLC for $5. As a player, you bought it for $10 and a new DLC comes out 3 months later. It's only $5, so you buy it, and then another one 3 months later. Well, it's only $5, so you bought it, and then another one 3 months later. It's only $5, so you buy it, right? You just keep doing this. Now, let's say that you tell your friend, hey man, this game is really good. And your friend's like, oh, how much was it? And you're like, oh, it's $10. And your friend goes to look at it and he goes, that's not $10. Now you get a $25 game. So new players are de-incentivized from jumping in. But old players feel like they got good value and they didn't pay that much, except they're both paying the same amount. It's a marketing strategy that preys on your inability to do math or inability to assign value over time. That's the issue. So like, not a fan of it. Really not a fan of it. If I'm going to release new content for Heartbound, I'm just going to patch it into the game, like I always have. No reason not to. What are your thoughts on expansions then for games? I only like expansions for live service games a lot of the times. Like, I really only like expansions for live service games. I don't like expansions a lot of the time outside of that. I think they're kind of gross. Like, if you're doing a single player game, the only time I'd say an expansion makes sense is like if you're adding another campaign to it. Live service game does make sense for expansions because that ends up being kind of a good deal. But yeah, it's pretty rare that single player games get expansions that make sense. It's pretty rare. What about the infamous Oblivion Horse Armor DLC? I think it's ass. Like, obviously. Not a fan of that. Risk of Rain? Risk of Rain wasn't an expansion. That was a totally new game. We went Risk of Rain to Risk of Rain 2. It's a completely different video game. That's fine. What about Vampire Survivors? I actually don't like Vampire Survivors. I didn't like the fact that they went from a $3 game and then sold millions of copies and then made it $5. Like, why? Why did they do that? There's no reason for that shit. Makes no sense. Bro gets mad from $2 game to $5 game? Yeah. Do you know why? Because there's no reason for that. If you have a $3 game and it sells millions of copies, and then you change that price to $5, you have a small team that has more money than they'll ever need, and you've changed the price to $5 after it becomes popular. If I took my game that was $10 and I made it $12 after it became popular, would you feel good about that? You'd hate it. Just like I do. It's like, because there's no reason for it. The only time that we ever have to change prices is when there's dramatic shifts in the valuation of individual currencies. Currency exchange rates is the only time we have to raise prices, because sometimes currency exchange rates go crazy, which is exactly what happened with Argentina, right? Like, that sucks. There's nothing we can do about it at that point. Where, like, suddenly, like, a currency just inflates to and is not worth anything anymore. Like, we have to take action then. There's nothing we can do about it. That's the only time that I think that's appropriate. That's the only time, and it's a global finance issue. Yeah, global finances go wacky. Bingo. Price your game in line with the gold standard? No, that's not really how that works. The way that you have to price your game, no matter what, man, is based on people's expendable income. You're making an entertainment piece. That's what that is. It's an entertainment piece. People don't need to buy your game. They don't have to. So you have to price it based on people's expendable income inside of that area. Disposable income is what you're targeting. What about board member bonuses? Gross. Yeah, it's gross. No, you don't have to buy it. I price ours based on a Big Mac. It's about a Big Mac and a half. Yeah. You want people to buy... What is this? You want people to buy your product? Make it affordable. Bingo. Yes. Make it affordable for each region, too. Always make it affordable for each region. You have to think about what the economics are of each region that you're selling the game in. And you have to think about specifically how much disposable income people in that region have. Yeah, regional pricing. Always regional pricing. Always. And then you price it appropriately based on that. It's very easy. It just takes a little bit of effort, right? Are you in favor of microtransactions in the game if the game is free? I'm in favor of microtransactions if they are cosmetic in nature and nothing else. There's no reason for it. There's no reason for anything else. Cosmetics only. How do you make the art for your game? Shay makes all the art and animation for Harbin. I do the technical art, which is particle effects, shadows, lighting, stuff like that. Sony priced Helldivers to 0 in some reason? No, they didn't price Helldivers to 0 in some regions. They made it unpurchasable in some regions. Those are two very different things. Yeah. No, 0 would be free. Lol, same thing? No, 0 would be free. They turned it... What they did was they took a selling video game and instead applied a 5-finger discount to everybody who wanted to go the extra mile. It's probably the greatest advertisement to piracy I've ever seen in my life. Insane to watch. So what they've done...
Attention gamers. When I heard about Riot's decision to charge $500 for a skin in their game, which resulted in the community revolting, Faker getting cancelled on Twitter for something that he probably had no say in, and the ban Ari movement skyrocketing her ban rate, I thought back to a simpler time before my life got consumed by this piss pit of a game when I used to make mobile apps. My games were all designed to chase that Flappy Bird fame, but with a fraction of its downloads I had to resort to other means to make money, which is when I came up with the idea on one of my games to release a character that was $1,000 to unlock. I figured if just one idiot buys this it will make it super worth, and so I waited, and after weeks you know what happened? Nothing, because that would be stupid as shit, but Riot seems to have adopted the same moronic business strategy that my 17-year-old self cooked up, and there's actual idiots who are actually buying this skin. In my last silver elo game the enemy support had this skin, so today's video I'd like to show how they were treated, but also investigate if they are a one-trick or just a loser with deep pockets who barely plays Ari and feeds so much feeding competitor, Ari's games. So the game starts and I'm one so shocked that a silver feeding competitor, Ari's game. So the game starts and I'm one so shocked that a silver player would buy this, and two so underwhelmed with how average it looks that I have to ask if it is indeed the break the bank version, that I have to ask as for that $500 I'd expect this thing to last hit for me, spam emotes when the enemy jungler is near and massage my ball sack when I play, but it doesn't seem to do any of that, and as a proud troll pick myself, my entire objective this game was to ruin Miss Moneybags' day. The first encounter went well as we kept her more frozen than her credit card company when they saw $500,000 be shipped out to China, as you see the world first $500 skinned Lysandra passive. I can't resist adding some color commentary in chat as we catch her trying to pull a quick one on us from the river, so I herd her like a dog back to lane, and even though we make it clear that we will be tattooing that expensive ass if she paths back to lane this way, people who buy that skin can't process logic, so she does anyways and gets pancaked. It's then revealed that the problem in this situation is actually in her ADC, who realizes he's one of those gamer girl bathwater collecting simps who purchased this for his girlfriend, which aside from being pathetic also seems counterproductive, as I would never want to incentivize this hoe to support for me again after seeing her gameplay, but to each simp his own. All it meant was that the next time these losers have to budget because of their spending habits and share one ice cube between the two of them, I can do a little icy claw teleport in and make the counting Dracula pay for his sins as his gold digger leaves him out to dry. But me and my Alaskan Falcon weren't just going to sit by and let this bank fraud fox go unharassed, so we let her think she can slip a 20 to her tower and it will protect her, but unfortunately you can't pay to not be shit at this game, so she dies again. Even when she is not in my lane she's quick to advertise herself as the worst player in the lobby, as it's baffling to me that Riot's target audience with this Hall of Legends Faker bullshit is casual kids who don't even know what her ult does. all while my own inability to afford the skin for myself is being projected by an endless stream of messages in all chat while pitching a tent in the enemy jungle, knowing that Ho normally pays other people to ward for her, so the genocide of the top 1% continues. Meanwhile, the bitch's benefactor himself is over here in chat claiming conspiracy theories about how in silver elo his jungler is win trading, as if that doesn't fit his prissy persona perfectly. All while the frozen fuckboys are taking their talents to the mid beach to make this cover band a traveling act, and the first hit single we played for their mid was called Victor Without a Victory, which knocked him dead if I'm being honest. But don't worry, League of Legends community, I kept my eye on the prize for all of us, and that prize was to single out this Ahri every single time I saw her, to make sure that no matter how much she paid, she would not be playing the game. I would track her movements, guessing where she would be, lurking in the shadows, all with the goal of bullying the trust fund baby and sending a message to the world that when the ban Ahri movement fails, the camp Ahri movement begins. Which is then of course followed up with me earning the chat ban that Riot eventually gave me, because this kind of banter is the problem with League of Legends after all. But who cares, we had a job to do, and that was to give two shits about who is dead or what objectives are up, and to put my frozen foot less ass on the line every time I saw that fox, to make sure that she couldn't enjoy the colors of her skin if her screen was always black and white, and once she was dead there's no point in showing the rest of that insane 1v3, right? Their team's Butterfree does try to engage, but considering the fully financed fox is about as useful as a chocolate teapot, it ended up looking like an embarrassing fail that sure some incompetent player ignorant to the reasons why win trading would be impossible in this gold elo game to make a comment like this. As the memes continue, as a 13 death Sion mid single-handedly carries my team to victory. But my questions for this Ahri weren't over. Surely a Giga Chad Lissandra ADC with her number was going to make her look like wet trash, but would this always be the case? A little investigating revealed that this bitch barely even plays Ahri, and when she does it looks just as bad as this one, so let's get a full feature of the fox for game 2. This starts with the ceremonial silver bullshit of trying to cheese a kill by stacking nuts to butts in a warded bush with high hopes of that fat first blood, only for that pipe dream to need a plumber but not to fear. Our brainless Master Yi was here, and his idea to execute a flawless level 4 tower dive came up short, which started this game out with this Ahri feeling truly immortalized for the small price of a cruise vacation. This insane display of mechanical skill on her part can only last for so long, as a minute later she deep throats a morgue bind like it's a lukewarm hot dog in front of a young Joey Chestnut before showing off her spectacular death animation. But it's not all bad, as they eventually receive a gank from a colorful caribou rocking a skin that compared to Ahri's I would say is also $500. Oh just kidding, it's like 10. It's so hard to tell these skins apart these days, which I'm sure was the goal of the design team when they decided to make one at a 500% markup. But hey, our fox is flying high knowing that she just set up a kill and there's nothing that's gonna rain on her parade. That is until her response to being ganked is to dash into danger, whiff a Valentine, and then proceed to be a pretty piss stain on the rift. I'm sorry, I'm letting my bias towards people who buy this bullshit get the better of me, as this video is supposed to serve as a nature documentary into understanding this types of people, so we must stick to the facts, like how in the next battle Ahri dashes into the fight, then Ahri throws her Q at absolutely nothing, then Ahri fails to dodge an important skill shot, then Ahri dies like a dog. A few minutes later and you see our pragmatic protagonist in a situation where resetting is a good idea, but anyone with that skin is obviously a greedy goblin, so we see her step out just to reveal to the sped Jedi that she is indeed still in lane and just begging to be given directions back to base, a tale as old as time, the damsel in distress and the elo inflated Master Yi player saying hells to the yeah over free gold. She then opts to rotate mid, show the world how beautiful this skin skill shots are when they don't hit their target, so naturally her little gank isn't effective when it can't be buffed by her bank, and then when the backups arrive from the enemy team, I'm thinking we get a little glimpse of some super sussienting behavior out of Riot's perfect customer. She continues her endless pursuit of finding the missing brain cells she was born without, as her charms are being fired into the wrong zip codes when she tries, as each encounter all her pretty pixels are being put to work to run away from fights, only to position exactly like someone who throws money at all their problems only to die again. And it always amazes me how anyone can turbo feed on a champ that has 4 flashes every 50 seconds, but leave it to Beaver in this one as we see her flying around the map, shiny nickels falling out of her silver spoon privileged asshole as she continues to feed. The enemy unsurprisingly is swiping down towers like this. Ari swipes her credit card, but she's down to prove that there's more to her pretty face than what's been paid for as she preps an ult into a group of 4 fed enemies only to have immediately buyer's remorse on that last charm. Forced to whip out the Golden Girls routine, and then back to base again for Miss Big Piggy Banks. In teamfights the performance is even more appalling as she goes from just following the procession without doing anything like she's an expensive float in a parade to being so distracted looking at her skin to realize that she just walked into 3 of them and a laser-equipped statue, which means another feeding loss for Riot Stream customer and a bit of insight into why they've decided to charge such a stupid amount of money for a skin, because idiots like this are actually paying for it. Rav out.
Video game. Star Wars Galaxies. It cannot be understated the hype behind this game at the time. Not only was it Star Wars, which was hugely popular again thanks to the Phantom Menace and a slew of books, comics, and other video games coming out at the time, but this was an MMO made by the creators of EverQuest. Nerds were frothing at the mouth. From 91 to 93, the Thrawn trilogy is released. This series of books is largely credited for reigniting interest in the expanded universe of Star Wars, non-film content.
Go that way. This is the 1st of November, 1994. Today is my first day of writing the new Star Wars series. Things have advanced so far in the last 20 years in terms of your ability to portray things on the screen that were just literally impossible before. And then very difficult in terms of cost. It's always a limiting factor. When I do these three, then it's finished. I've kind of done the story, and I feel I've accomplished what I set out to do originally.
And in 99 it does release. Phantom Menace and EverQuest come out the same year. Fast forward to March of 2000. LucasArts approaches the developers of EverQuest, Virant, and strikes an agreement for them to make a Star Wars online game. They announced it, stating it would be released by 2001. Yes, just 1 year of development expected. It would take place during the original trilogy era between New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, but they would still include prequel content, like Naboo, music from Phantom Menace, and the ability to massacre Gungans. Even though it was early on in MMO history, it would still be the first licensed MMO game of an established intellectual property, one of the biggest in the world at that. So expectations were galactic. Virant hired a few veterans in the MMO world in Ralph Koster and Rich Vogel, who had worked on Ultima Online. The company would set up a new office in Austin, Texas, and were ready to work on a new, legendary game. But just a couple months later, Virant Interactive was acquired by Sony Online Entertainment. The game finally begins development in September of 2000, half a year after the game was announced. About 7 months into development, SOE announces that there will also be a space sim expansion to be released 6 months after the base game. They also pushed back the initial release from 2001 to the second half of 2002. Later that year, the chief creative officer of SOE resigns to form his own game company, taking many original EverQuest developers with him. This caused some disruption within the office, but they powered onward anyways. Eventually, the website reached 100,000 users, making it the biggest online community for a game at the time. Everyone was eager to learn any scraps of information they could about perceivably the most important game of their lives. Eventually, Galaxies is announced for PlayStation 2 and Xbox, but both versions would get cancelled before release. And then in July 2002, closed beta testing began. Players were introduced to the profession system. Characters didn't just pick one class, they were meant to specialize in multiple professions, each of which were focused on different personalities and roles people would play in the game's ecosystem. There were combat classes, such as marksmen and brawlers, but also entertainers, doctors, crafters, gatherers, even hairstylists. Professions were meant to reflect the Bartle taxonomy of player types. It's basically an alignment chart of how players play in multiplayer games. I think in more modern terms, you'd say something like PvP, PvE, roleplay, and solo players. In short, there would be a place for everybody. It was designed to be a sandbox-style MMO, similar to Ultima Online, allowing players to explore planets freely, level up multiple classes of their choice, and even have a real house within the world that people could visit. In the holiday of 2002, the core game gets a subtitle. Title, Star Wars Galaxies, an Empire Divided, alluding to the heavy focus of Rebel versus Imperial faction action gameplay. Characters could sign up between the fascist Imperials or the correct Rebel Alliance. And then the release date is once again pushed back to April of 2003. And when that time finally comes around, SOE needs more time.
I'm afraid he's running out of time.
Why? What's wrong with him?
It's his time. It's running out.
Well, what does he need?
He needs to have more time.
What can we do?
Well, I suppose we could try a time transplant.
They make a case to LucasArts to delay the game once again, preferably by the holiday season, about 8 more months. They were given 2. At this point, everyone in SOE was living in the office, crunching, trying to get SWG ready. Many features weren't working, had to be cut or delayed until after release, such as vehicles and mounts, meaning people had to walk everywhere on launch. This actually made the Scout class really important, which had a skill tree dedicated to traversing terrain quicker. Player housing would be in the game at launch, but the player city feature was delayed. A lot of quest content that they planned out was constantly breaking, and they resorted to mission terminals as a main source of content for many professions. There was supposed to be a dynamic point of interest system intended to randomly pop up in the wilderness, generated layouts of buildings, enemies, friendly NPCs. These dynamic quests were scrapped. Professions as a whole also suffered during this crunch time. Originally, some professions were much bigger or smaller in their skill trees depending on their complexity. Maybe image designer would be a smaller skill tree, whereas Commando would be much bigger. But the guy in charge of professions left for another company and on short notice. So in a pinch, all professions were made to fit a new, more rigid onion skill tree system. Smaller professions had to be bloated out, and bigger classes had to be heavily condensed. And finally, some professions were just cut altogether, like writer, miner, and other untold half-baked ideas. And a cherry on top for all these issues is the hardware SOE was using to deploy their live game wasn't as powerful as their testing hardware. The biggest side effect of this was enemy AI was unable to negotiate terrain correctly to find players. They found a solution for this issue at the sacrifice of players no longer being able to step over shorter 3D objects or jumping, making you feel more like a 2D dot on the floor when it came to getting around obstacles. Yes, there was a jump emote, but it wasn't really a jump. Leading up to release, SOE even flew out some of their most dedicated community members, trying to get their opinion on what needed to be fixed most, what was necessary, what was unnecessary, and what they wanted to see on release if possible. Then in June 2003, Star Wars Galaxies finally released for the US and Europe, and no one could log in. Eventually, the game recovered after stumbling out the gate, and gradually, features were finished and bugs were squashed. Star Wars Galaxies launched with 8 playable races. Each race had different bonuses that gave them a slight edge in some professions, while humans were evenly balanced across all attributes. Characters started in one of 6 basic professions, and once you meet prerequisites for some advanced classes, you could take those as well. There was a limit though, your character only had so many profession points, and you only had 1 character per server. You had to rely on others for essential services, crafters for gear, entertainers for healing fatigue and wounds, doctors for healing diseases and giving buffs, smugglers for slicing open containers or illegally modifying your gear beyond their natural limits. Traveling between planets and towns would be accomplished through the use of shuttles and spaceports, which would ferry players around on a set timer, so they became mini hubs of social interaction and even PvP. Each of the initial 10 planets consisted of 16 square kilometers of openly navigable area. Anywhere that wasn't a major city, you could build your house. All you need to do was acquire a blueprint crafted by an architect and place it down. Although housing was awesome and great for neighborhoods and private merchant empires, houses were getting placed around the entrances to the very few static, open-world dungeons that everyone had to share. For the combat system, it's all about ham. Health, action, and mind bars. Every combat skill targeted 1 or more of these pools of points. If any of these bars reach 0, you're incapacitated and prone to be death blown. When you died in the game, your clone would be reproduced at a nearby cloning facility, incurring wounds, fatigue, and even paying a credit fee if you didn't make it your selected cloning facility. Through combat and death, you would receive many different types of wounds, disease, and fatigue, all of which needed to be healed by doctors or entertainers. These debuffs would permanently lower your ham bars and other stats, so it was important to get it resolved. I think by this point developers realized that players didn't like such punishing death penalties, like having to go run and get your corpse, or losing experience. Every time you used a skill, it went into the combat queue, which went off over time on a global cooldown. There were also different postures and stances you could take, which limited movement and made you more vulnerable to melee attacks, but also allowed for better ranged accuracy. Mission terminals would generate random missions in the wilderness, usually consisting of basically you just go to a waypoint and kill some things and destroy a nest. Entertainers made their earnings in cantinas through tips. Gathering resources meant you had to go out there and survey the land. And crafters basically made everything in the game. Medkits, houses, droids, armor, weapons, clothing, instruments, spice, you name it. And if you were a merchant, then player housing was extra important because you could set up merchant NPCs in your house to sell your wares. It was really common to shop around for best in slot equipment at player neighborhoods, and saving the waypoint for later in your datapad. The game also featured no main storyline. It was buggy as hell, reviews were mixed at best, and there was a clear lack of content. Yet still, it was Star Wars, and players made their own fun. It became the second biggest MMO outside of Asia behind EverQuest. Sure, many players were unsubbing due to the game's bugs and balance issues, but the player base kept growing every month, eventually surpassing 300,000 subs by October 2003. This is what many nostalgically refer to as the golden age of SWG. But expectations from LucasArts were higher. They wanted to bolster the subscription numbers in a big way. They wanted a wave of new and returning players. They wanted a Jedi by Christmas. So let's talk about the Jedi problem. How do you implement a high-demand Jedi class into a game set during the original trilogy? After all, they're supposed to be, dead. You just can't have 1,000 Jedi walking all over the place. Not to mention, they would be totally overpowered compared to other classes. Well, as it turns out, Jedi were already in the game at launch. There were rumors of a Jedi class, but no one actually knew it existed. Keep in mind that this is before the modern day of MMOs, where every bit of information is data mined the microsecond the game is made available to the public. There was still an air of mystery to these games back then. The most we had was like Alakazam? God, I'm old. The method to unlock Jedi had many reworks, but here's how it went down. And a lot of this is directly from Raph Koster's website, the director of SWG. At first, SOE wanted Jedi to only be unlocked by those they deemed worthy and wouldn't abuse their overpowered status. They considered picking players by hand, based on how much they played the game or how honorably they roleplayed, but then who decides who's the best roleplayer? Then they thought, maybe it could be players who completed a randomized set of hidden tasks, a checklist showing that they experienced every part of the game. It could be things like visiting the highest point on a planet, killing a rare creature, winning some duels, or crafting a specific item. And they would try to make each character's list different so players couldn't reverse engineer the process and figure it out. And that's almost how it ended up. But there was one problem. The way they tracked data